Now, this might come as a surprise to many people, but growing up, I didn't actually like pho. So, as a little kid, whenever my mom made it, she would have to force me to sit down and eat it. And being the little crybaby I was, I'd sit there and just sob, with snot running down my nose, taking the littlest bites of noodle, and feeling like it was the end of the world. But as I grew older and my palate became more refined, I began to crave the rich and deeply comforting broth. The slightly chewy rice noodles, the tender slices of beef, and all the freshness of the herbs and veggies. And these days, it doesn't really matter when or why. Whether it's with my friends and family at lunch, in the middle of the night when I want something hearty, or bright and early after drinking a little too much. So the funny thing is, the dish that I used to cry over as a kid has now become something that I'd chase across the world if I had to. And I can't imagine my life without pho, and honestly, I wouldn't want to. And today, I'll break down step by step how to make my mom's pad thai, or rare beef pho, from scratch. So do me a favor and make sure you like, comment, share, and save this video. Alright y'all, remember to wash your hands. Now the first thing we'll do is parboil our beef bones, and today I'm using 4 pounds of beef knuckles and marrow bones. To a big pot of water, we're going to boil them for about 10 to 15 minutes, as this will help remove the impurities and keep our broth nice and clean. Then we'll drain it and give the bones a thorough scrub and rinse to remove any debris still attached to them. Set your beef bones aside for now, and make sure you wash your pot too. Now for our aromatics, I'm going to char up an onion and a 2-inch nub of ginger. We'll cut both of those in half, and then to a dry pan on medium-high heat, we'll add the aromatics cut side down. I'm going to let them sit on the pan for 4 to 5 minutes without touching them so that it can develop a nice dark char. And alternatively, if you have an open flame stovetop, charring the onion and ginger directly over the fire is even better. Now while the onion and ginger is doing its thing, I'm just going to take this time to peel a medium-sized daikon and cut that up. The daikon is optional in this recipe, but it adds a nice natural sweetness to the broth that I really love. And you can't forget to pay the daikon tax. Next up, let's toast our dried spices, and I have all the essentials. For my recipe, I like using 1 dried cinnamon stick, 1 cardamom pod, 3 star anise, and then I have a tablespoon of fennel seeds, a tablespoon of coriander seeds, and half a teaspoon of dried cloves. Now everyone and their mamas has their own ratio and measurements on how much of each to use, so feel free to play around with it and figure out what your preferences are. Now to a different dry pan on medium-high heat, we'll toast the spices for 2 to 3 minutes or until fragrant. Then to a spice bag or a stainless steel mesh ball like this, we'll add in our toasted spices. And with all of those things done, it's finally time to make our broth. So to a pot with 8 quarts of water, we'll add in our parboiled beef bones, the charred onion and ginger, the daikon, and of course our toasted spices. I'm gonna bring this up to a rolling boil, and then we'll skim off any impurities that rises up to the top. Then we'll cover the lid, reduce the heat to low, and let this gently simmer for 1.5 to 2 hours. Now the next big tip to making sure you have a really light and clean broth that's deeply flavorful is pulling things out at the right time. And for the charred aromatics as well as the spice bag, right around that 1.5 hour mark is perfect. This ensures that we give it enough time to impart its flavor without giving the onion a chance to disintegrate and for the spices to not overpower the broth. So pull all of that out, and all that should be left are our beef bones and daikon. Now this next part is the most difficult because there's nothing else to do other than to wait. And for the best pho, you're gonna wanna let this simmer overnight, but at the very least, a total of 6 hours is okay too. Now a couple of important things to note is that while it's simmering, you're gonna wanna occasionally check on it and skim away any impurities, but also make sure that it never comes back up to a boil. We want the beef bones to gently simmer over a long period of time, and this will ensure that our broth stays light and clean. If the heat is too high, all the fat, protein, and the collagen from the bones disperse into the broth, resulting in a cloudy pho. And while the taste would probably still be fine, a hallmark of most Vietnamese soups and stocks is the clarity of the broth itself. While our pho broth is simmering away, let's get the rest of our ingredients prepped. Now for pho thai, all we're using is thinly sliced beef. And the traditional cut is eye of round, but you can honestly use anything you want, and if you got a little bit of money, nicer cuts like ribeye or filet mignon works great. Now to thinly slice your beef, I like to partially freeze it for a few hours before I'm ready to cut. This will help firm up the beef, making it easier to slice thinly and evenly. So taking a sharp knife, we'll cut the beef as thinly as possible against the grain. And if you like this recipe and you want to learn how to make more of your favorite Vietnamese and Asian dishes, make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications to stay up to date on all my latest posts. Moving on from the beef, let's prep all of our herbs and veggies. And with a lot of these things like the bean sprouts, Thai basil, and culantro, all you need to do is give them a thorough rinse to make sure that they're ready for consumption. And for the garnishes, we'll start with a white onion. We'll cut that in half along the grain first, and then using a mandolin, we'll cut the onion into thin slices against the grain. Now to reduce some of the raw onion bite, you can optionally soak them in some cold water for 5 minutes. Then for our green onions and cilantro, we'll just finely chop them up. Then I have some jalapenos, and we'll just slice that up on a slight bias. And the last little bit of our prep is cutting our limes into wedges. Now before we move on to seasoning our broth, let's quickly plate up some of our veg that we'll serve with the pho. So to a plate, we'll add some of our bean sprouts. Then I have our Thai basil and culantro. We'll add a couple of lime wedges and our jalapenos. And that's pretty much it. We'll set that aside briefly and we'll put the final touches on our pho. Now my broth has been simmering for about 8 hours, and I'm just going to remove everything from the pot. You can save the bones to pick at, and for the marrow bones, I actually like adding them into my bowl later. And the daikon, for the most parts, has already served its purpose, but lots of folks like eating the daikon in their pho too. Now once we removed everything from the pot, you can take an extra little step and filter the broth through a fine mesh strainer to remove any lingering particles. Then to season our pho, I'm going to add in a nub of rock sugar, about 4 tablespoons of deer mom fish sauce, and 2 tablespoons of MSG. But with any of my recipes, I always recommend seasoning to taste so that it better fits your own palate and preferences. And just check out how light and clean that broth looks though. Now the last thing we'll do is quickly cook our rice noodles. And this is the brand that I like using, and it's what my mom has been using my entire life. So to a separate pot of boiling water, I'm gonna quickly blanch the noodles for 5 to 10 seconds. I personally like my noodles more on the chewy side, and overcooked noodles are one of my biggest pet peeves. And with that done, it's time to plate. So first we'll get our noodles into our bowl, and then we'll tile on our sliced beef. Add some green onions and cilantro right on top, and then we'll pour our hot broth directly over the beef. We'll finish our pho with some of our white onions. And personally, I'm a purist when it comes to pho, and I don't like adding any sriracha or hoisin, but feel free to eat it however you like. And just like that, you've made an incredible pho thai at home. As always, the recipe and measurements are on my blog at feedthepudge.com. And if you've made it this far, let me know in the comment section, what was a dish that you hated growing up, but now can't live without? Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy.